Tumeanza safari sasa. Need to pick a job here. Switch off the engine. To pick a job here. Tunaekelea simiti bana. Tunaekelea simiti. Sijui kama radio leo itafanya ama italeta nini. LBC, where's LBC?
There are clearly some people who are using international events as a shroud for anti-Semitic views, but we in the Met will always take on racism.
That was the head of the Met, Sir Mark Rowley, speaking earlier to LBC. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, told us that Jewish people don't feel safe as anti-Semitism has increased in the UK since the October the 7th attacks. He's been speaking to our reporter, Fraser Knight.
Well, I think what's important is, of course, many of us are angry at what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, and indeed what happened on October the 7th at a music festival. I'm not sure how these chants help the people in Gaza or the West Bank. I'm not sure if hatred should be amplified, and that's why it's really important for the BBC to reflect on what they got wrong and how they can ensure this doesn't happen again.
Do you think the country is a safe place for Jews at the moment?
Well, my response to that is clouded by my conversations with Jewish friends. You know, Jewish people don't feel safe. That's their lived experience. We can't pretend that's not the experience of our friends, family, colleagues, neighbours, fellow citizens who are Jewish. And it's really important those of us aren't Jewish provide allyship to our friends. It's possible to be critical, as indeed I am, of Netanyahu, to be really angry at what the IDF are doing, but to recognise that there are Jewish people in this country feeling incredibly scared, and it's important to distinguish what the IDF are doing, what Netanyahu is doing, what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, with understanding the fear that our Jewish friends have.
And are you disappointed the BBC didn't cut the feed of Bob Phelan during that set?
I think the BBC have got questions to answer. It's important that lessons are learned. I've only discovered what this man is saying on social media, but it's really important for the BBC to understand that actually they've got responsibility as the broadcaster that they are, to take responsibility for maybe unintentional, but providing a platform for these sorts of messages to be amplified.
Steve Khan speaking to our reporter Fraser Knight earlier on. Jane has called from Camden. Jane, you think a lot of this is cynical commercialism, don't you?
Hi, Sheila. Yes, I do. Thanks for taking my call. I'd like to just lay out my thoughts, really, if I may. I'm just thinking that if I'm not a well-known artist, what is the way to get myself out there with people talking about me, which is basically what is happening? How do I get that free marketing? And that is to say something controversial. Now, whether he truly believes that or he doesn't, I don't know. I'm not a fan of either Hamas nor the Israeli government. Quite frankly, I feel for the people that are stuck in the middle of what is in effect a group of old men who just basically want to annihilate one another and everybody in it. I'd sooner get rid of them in all honesty. But I do think that, like what a couple of other callers have said, and you have also pointed out yourself, this is all fashion. You know, these people who go out here, they're chanting these things. Some of it. Well, yeah. I think there's a lot of misguided people that get het up with it, and think it's a cool thing to do. It's in vogue. When in actual fact, they haven't got a clue what they're talking about. So, and I think this guy, maybe there's a big element of that. If you say something controversial, you're going to get coverage. Does he actually realise that if he was at the Nova Festival, that if Hamas would have stormed it, they would have shot him just as quickly as they shot everybody else? So I think that's what people need to remember.
Yeah, they weren't handing out identity forms, were they? No. And, I mean, he's already been dropped by his agents, so we'll see what comes next. I mean, clearly the police are looking at it as well. And I think people who are comparing it to Lucy Connolly, the woman who was jailed for saying burn it down about the hotel full of asylum seekers ahead of the riot or during the riots.
Number 9.
I think there's an interesting comparison to be made there, isn't there? She was calling for particular groups of people to die, and so was he.
Yeah. I think there's a definite comparison. I think in all honesty, both are saying the same thing in a different form, and you have to be consistent with how you apply the law there. I think it's despicable, what both of them are saying, and quite frankly, hate speech has no place, and that's where really we need to be reacting. People should have stopped and just gone, hang on a minute, no, that's not right. What's happening in Palestine is appalling. It's absolutely appalling. And there has to be another way of dealing with it, but at the same time, you cannot forget that Hamas not only went in on the atrocities, but they also persecute their own Palestinian people. They also kill, rape, maim them too. So these are bad people. Hamas are bad people. People that are in the Israeli government, probably not all of them, but the ones that are kind of, fueling this war, they are bad people too. But we just have to recognise that. Not the people that are in the middle.
I'd go further than saying bad about some of the individuals you mentioned. They're full of hate, which is why, full of hatred towards a particular group, which is why the guy on the stage shouting hate and death towards a particular identifiable group of people is just so dangerous.
Yeah, it absolutely is. He clearly had an axe to grind, didn't he? And anyone could talk about a previous employer. I've worked for lots of male employers that have been awful, but you don't see me standing up on stage and asking for all men to be done away with. I just think that Glastonbury should have definitely dealt with him more harshly. I think the BBC should have just pulled the plug. In fact, Glastonbury should have probably pulled the mics. And that's not about stopping free speech. There's a difference between free speech and something, perfect words as this said, and just basically inciting hate and murder, and that's what it is. And I go back to the point about the Nova Festival. Any person that was there chanting those words needs to have a bit of a think about themselves, and if they were at that Nova Festival, whether the Hamas terrorists would have come in and spared their lives, they absolutely would not have.
Thank you, Jane, for your call. Jane in Camden.
Within the next 1 hour.
We'll speak after the news. I've lost track of time. Time for the news. It's 3.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 3 o'clock. A 92-year-old man has been found guilty of raping and murdering an elderly woman in Bristol in 1967. Louisa Dunn's murder went unsolved for almost 6 decades until new DNA tests were carried out. Detective Inspector Dave Marchant from Avon and Somerset Police told LBC Ryland Headley may be guilty of other crimes.
There is a possibility that he is culpable for further offences. We are working with colleagues across the country and our colleagues in the National Crime Agency to understand and identify what further offences could be attributed to him, so that we can, if there are any, hopefully try and bring him to justice for those as well.
The case is thought to be the UK's longest-running cold case ever to be solved. The BBC has said mistakes were made in its coverage of Glastonbury, admitting comments by One Act were utterly unacceptable. The corporation allowed the live stream of rap duo Bob Vylan, who led the crowds in chants of death to the IDF. In a statement, the regulator Ofcom says it's seeking further information from the BBC. Natalie Sanandaji is a survivor of the Nova Festival attacks on October the 7th. She's told LBC she feels there's a global wave of anti-Semitism at youth events.
I, along with many other Nova survivors, do not feel safe at music festivals since October 7th. Hamas turned the dance floor into a war zone on October 7th. But since then, I've feared for my life at many festivals I've gone to.
We understand the group has now been dropped by their agents. The government's own modelling shows around 150,000 people will be pushed into poverty by 2030 as a result of planned welfare cuts. That's even with the partial U-turn announced by the Prime Minister as he tries to stave off a rebellion by his own MPs. It's been a fantastic start for British tennis players in the opening day of Wimbledon. Qualifier Oliver Tarvett's Grand Slam debut ended in a straight sets victory over Leandru Riedi, while Sinead Cartel beat former French Open champion Yelena Ostapenko in 3 sets. In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading down 30 points at 87.68. The pound buys $1.36 and €1.16. LBC weather: showers for Northern Ireland, Scotland and Eastern England. It's hot elsewhere with highs of 34 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Elizabeth Secker.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Sheila Fogarty.
Hello there, good afternoon to you if you're just joining us here at LBC. We've been talking for a couple of hours now. I'm going to continue to talk on the topic because so many of you are calling in on it. And I think it raises questions from lots of different angles as well. This is the events at Glastonbury at the weekend when Bob Vylan, never heard of them until yesterday if I'm honest, as you heard in the news just said, they've been dropped by their agents already, but the BBC is in trouble as well over it. Glastonbury to some degree is as well because Bob Vylan, an individual in a duo, or the duo I think is called Bob Vylan, can't keep up with the names of all these superstars, he basically started a chant, death to the IDF, if you're not aware of it, death to the IDF, and large numbers, in very large numbers, in a crowd of about 30,000 people joined in with it. The BBC did not cut away from it to other performances. It could have, it didn't. And apart from the chanting, there were other anti-Semitic statements made by the individual, and then a call to violence as well after the chant, saying that violence was the only way to respond to Israel. We'll talk more about that throughout the hour, but I want to talk with Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor, and Tom Pollard, Head of Social Policy at the New Economics Foundation, former DWP advisor, for a few minutes too, on the welfare bill and the changes to it, and the explanation given today by Liz Kendall, the Secretary of State in charge of the DWP, because the bill is going to come to Parliament tomorrow, isn't it, Natasha? Before we do that, on Glastonbury, Keir Starmer's commented on this as well, hasn't he?
Yes, and he gave some very, very strong words yesterday about the Glastonbury row, calling it hateful speech and basically taking a bit of a pop at the BBC to take action. And today they have. Obviously, we've seen that very strong statement from the BBC today, admitting that they were wrong on this. But I think it's fair to say, Sheila, that there has been real concern at the top levels of government about this row and about what it means and about what it means for the BBC. And, some critics will say this is just a bit of a ploy to stop us, media, from talking about the welfare rebellion. But others will say, no, actually, Keir Starmer does understand the need to rid anti-Semitism out of public life and feels that very acutely because...
Well, the Labour Party has its own sensitivities over it, doesn't it?
Exactly, and some people have been saying that today, so I think it's fair to sort of reflect that. But, I understand that it was Liz Andy, the Director General of the BBC on Saturday night after seeing what we saw at Glastonbury, and she was the one that instigated that. I also understand that she feels a little bit like the BBC have been a little bit too slow to act over the last couple of days, and there was some suggestion that the statement that the BBC did today, whether they did admit that they were wrong, could have been done yesterday, and there were some questions about why there hadn't been. But obviously the political pressure that they've been putting on the BBC, and she's in regular contact with the BBC and all levels of that, but it's very clear that they feel that this line has been overstepped and have decided to really push them on it. And I'm told that Keir Starmer, that Lisa and Andy are quite happy with what they've said, but they will be chasing them, putting their feet to the fire to try and figure out how this happened, why this stream wasn't pulled when it was.
And what accountability there will be.
Exactly what accountability there will be for some BBC executives too.
Or indeed lower down the chain, who knows? I'm not sure how it will work, really. We'll see. And on to the welfare bill. It is going to come to Parliament tomorrow. It's likely to go through as a result of these changes, but we can't say for sure, clearly.
I don't think anybody can can say for sure, but there are still a definite
Skani
contingent
ikifika
of
wiki
MPs that are
ina
unhappy.
shuka
And
kushuka.
what has just been published in the last few minutes is a written statement from Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary. So it's sort of outlining the changes, the detailed changes that we do expect to be made to this welfare bill. She talks in this statement about those two main changes. One of them is strengthening the universal credit element, and obviously, of course, the announcement that they will continue for PIP for people who are already on PIP. They will continue in their current form under these new legislation, even though they will change for people who will claim PIP in the future. That's a bit of a bone of contention among many Labour MPs at the moment. And we had a little bit of information from the government earlier today, where they've essentially done a mini impact assessment of the changes, where they found that still 150,000 more people will be pushed into poverty as a result of these changes. Previously, it was expected to be around 250,000. So there has been a bit of movement there, but still MPs upset that anybody will be pushed into poverty under a Labour government. That is going to be something quite difficult for them to stomach. And they're also going to protect what's called the severe conditions criteria. So anybody who is very, very severely disabled, the government is saying today that they will be completely protected from getting any of their incomes eroded at all. So Liz Kendall, discussing this in this full statement, and she's going to be speaking in the House of Commons in the next half an hour to try and basically start the process of trying to beg MPs to vote for this legislation. And will they vote for it? Well, from what I'm hearing, I think there is a group of 30 to 50 sort of MPs who are unhappy with it. Will they abstain? Will they decide to vote against? Those are very different. Number 10 are not saying today whether they will use the whip or not, which I think is quite interesting. Usually that's the kind of thing the government will say to try and get MPs on side, but actually I think that really could risk making things worse if they were to say, well, if you don't vote for this legislation, you will lose the whip. So lots of different changes. They're all a bit technical. This statement that Liz Kendall has just published is quite extensive and goes into a bit more of the detail onto that. So I think once MPs have had a chance to look at the details of that, they will then be able to decide whether they will vote on it. But I still think there is going to be a sizable rebellion for Keir Starmer tomorrow.
And it's easy, isn't it? We've seen it in lots of examples in the past. It's easy for a government to say, or a department lead to say, the most disabled will not lose any of their income. I mean, we know when people lost parts of their, or when people there was a delay, wasn't there, in people getting universal credit when it first came in, and we know that at least one man died as a result of that. And you can give commitment that this particular event won't happen, but tell us how it won't happen.
Yeah, and I think what the government is going to struggle to do is today they've put down an amendment to the legislation already, basically saying that it won't apply to people who are currently already on PIP. So they are trying to reassure people, but actually, because the text of the bill doesn't exist yet, it will exist only in stages later on down the line. There's not something written down, but now it's in the government documents. It's now been published on the parliamentary website. Hopefully that you'll have Liz looking at you'll have Liz Kendall in the Commons basically making these promises to MPs, and if they are found to have misled the House in any way, they're in serious trouble. So these talking to MPs in the House of Commons really hopefully will go a long way, I think, to persuading them, but I don't think it's going to be enough for a lot of Labour MPs.
I suspect we'll be talking about this again tomorrow, won't we, Natasha? Thank you very much. Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor. Listening to that, with us is Tom Hollard, Head of Social Policy at the New Economics Foundation, DWP advisor. Good afternoon to you, Tom. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jim.
What's the biggest risk in all of this to the people in receipt of benefits, whether it's PIP or whether it's work-related?
Yeah, I think what we've seen over the last few days is the government conceding that people who currently receive this support will continue to do so for the time being. But, we haven't really seen any shift in what's actually being proposed for people who need this support in the future. And, if these changes were a real concern in terms of how they would impact people right now, then those concerns should be just as great for how they would impact someone who becomes ill or becomes in need of this support in the future. The other thing to say is that, as we're hearing there, the government's produced a new impact assessment. It says 150,000 people will be pushed into poverty. Our analysis suggests that's a large underestimate of the true figure. What the government has done there is to take previous changes that the previous government had thought about making and said, well, because we're not going to proceed with those changes, we can effectively offset the number of people who would have been affected from our figures. So we think the true figure in terms of the world as it exists today compared to the world as it exists at the end of the Parliament and these changes is probably closer to 250,000 people pushed into poverty.
One of the things that Keir Starmer said, and we'll see if he says it about this too, but one of the things he said in defence of the budget when it was announced, the proper budget, not the spending review, when the OBR, you'll remember, put forward forecasts as to the degree of the numbers of people that would be tipped into absolute poverty from relative poverty. I mean, these are very sort of dry technical terms, but it's people suffering is what it is when all is said and done. When those figures were put to him, I remember him saying, yes, but that forecast doesn't take into account the numbers of people we will have got into work by then, so their income stream will be different from the one on the OBR's spreadsheet, essentially. Now, let's hope he's right when he says that, but it's far from certain that will be the case, and only yesterday I was reading a report that current civil servants in the DWP are saying, look, you can speed this up if you like, but we haven't got enough staff, we haven't got enough of a programme ready to actually get people into work at the speed that you want us to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, there have been estimates based on the kind of best evidence of previous support schemes that say, hopefully this additional investment will lead to more people getting back into work. But you're probably looking in the order of magnitude of maybe 100,000 people out of 1 million people, over 1 million people, who will see their benefits reduced as a result of this change. So the idea that the movement into work, which we all want to see where that's appropriate and possible, that justifies this kind of income for other people, or even in some way facilitates or supports that movement into work.
And in a way, that's the big test, isn't it? If you took money from people, are they now in work? That's the big test.
Well, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest that actually being in greater financial hardship rather than incentivising people into work, especially when people have health conditions and disabilities, makes that return to work harder. The reason that we've seen an increase in claims for PIP in particular is a combination of worse health but greater financial insecurity. So reducing the incomes of those households is not going to help those people live more independently or do things like move towards work.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. Good to talk to you, and we'll all look closely tomorrow at that vote in Parliament. Tom Pollard, Head of Social Policy at the New Economics Foundation. Thanks again to Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor. Back to your calls and your messages as well, your texts and emails not emails, what am I talking about? WhatsApp messages about the events at Glastonbury over the weekend. We'll talk more about that in a second. It's 3:50.
Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
As world leaders fawn over the President of the United States.
Let him fight for about 2-3 minutes, then it's easier to stop him.
Daddy has to sometimes use strong language.
Keir Starmer prepares to welcome Donald Trump to the UK later this year.
It's an invitation for a second state visit. This is really special.
Does the fawning work? We'll hear from the former Trump Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci when he returns to take your calls this afternoon from 4.
Tom Swarbrick, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m. Listen on your radio, on Global Player, and the new LBC app.
I know how I like to invest. That's why I choose eToro. Access to global markets, expert analysis, shared knowledge. On eToro, I pick my own investors.
Wait, what?
Pick my own stocks. Pick my own stocks.
I'm gonna
Choose your mix of assets. Or copy top performing traders. Yep, all in one app. Multi-asset investment platform. Trading does not amount to investment advice. The value of your investments may go up or down. Your capital is at risk.
Calling all young creatives. Kickstart your career in media. Apply now and join us in years 10 or 12 at Global Academy. globalacademy.com.
A Southern train is a place where you can have more me time. A chance to skip traffic and glide to wherever you need to be. With headspace to focus on more important matters, like if that cloud is a starfish or sunflower. Fast journeys without the rush with great deals at southernrailway.com. Terms apply.
It's time to say hello to Hello Mondays at Morrison's. Because starting this Monday, you can enjoy 10% off fresh Market Street counters and cafes. That means 10% off prawns, 10% off pies, 10% off lattes, and 10% off lamb chops. So start your week with a little win. You'll wish Monday lasted all week.
more reasons to shop at Morrison's.
Majority of stores subject to availability. Excludes online and Morrison's Daily Milk Adder app required 18 plus. Excludes Market Street pre-packed products. See online for details.
This is LBC with Sheila Fogarty. Call 0345 6060 973. Alexa, send a comment to LBC. Text 84850.
Before we continue our conversation about the anti-Semitic comments of one of the performers at Glastonbury, and indeed a crowd joining in enthusiastically, or large parts of a crowd of 30,000 people joining in enthusiastically, shouting death, death to the IDF. Let me bring you up to date on some of the latest news coming from Gaza. Obviously 50 hostages, the majority sadly dead, are still being held there. At least 20 Palestinians are thought to have been killed in an Israeli airstrike that hit a seafront cafe, frequently used by activists, journalists, and local residents in Western Gaza. This is according to eyewitnesses to the events. As well as that, we know from late yesterday that Israel has ordered evacuations by Palestinians. Has ordered Palestinians to evacuate from parts of northern Gaza again, ahead of increased military action. In the meantime, the US President Donald Trump is pushing for a ceasefire deal. People in neighborhoods across Gaza City and in an area called Jabalia have been told to move south towards the coastal area of Al-Mawazi as Israeli military operations intensify and expand westwards. That's the latest from Gaza. We're hoping to speak to ActionAid, or it's a hit and miss on both at the moment, just in terms of their availability, and because things are very unpredictable for them. ActionAid representatives in Gaza and a journalist that we speak to regularly on these matters, Nogaton Polsky. So we hope to speak to either or both of those before fall. But back to your calls on Bob Villan and those comments yesterday, and the BBC. I wonder whether the comments exercise you more than the fact that the BBC stayed with them and didn't cut away from them when it has every opportunity to do so at the press of the moment. Maggie in Muswell Hill, hello.
Hi Sheila, I just want to preface this because I just heard what you reported about Gaza by saying, first of all, I think the killing has to stop, the war has to stop, the hostages have to come home, everyone has to stop hating on each other, it's enough. Secondly, Glastonbury has just given people, not just Glastonbury, but this whole conflict has given people permission just to spew hatred at anybody, regardless of anything. And as a liberal, progressive Jew living in North London, I was the victim of the most anti-Semitic abuse yesterday, walking back from our local neighbourhood with my daughter, that I have ever encountered in my life.
What happened?
And there was a group of people that they've been putting up yellow ribbons in our area, which signifies the release of the hostages that are heartful of the hostages who've been kidnapped on October the 7th.
Which shouldn't be a controversial act at all.
No, not at all.
Well, it isn't, but it shouldn't be deemed to be.
Well, you would have thought not, and there was a group of people that had large shears cutting them down. And I asked them why they were coming to be belittled or to have this level of abuse directed at them. It's just... I'm exhausted by it.
I'm sure you're exhausted by it. I'm sure you are. And Maggie, I was thinking it's shades of the hostage pictures being pulled down, isn't it? It's a similar thing. I think... And I remember the thing that shocked me most about that was the speed with which it happened. Literally, the day those pictures were up, people were pulling them down. And I thought to myself, God, whatever you think of your enemy, which is how they view Israel, the people who are tearing them down, come on, surely you can see that in a multicultural society like ours, if a group of people puts up posters in support of babies and women who've been kidnapped, think of the Bibas family, for example, how you could pull down those posters, I just don't know.
But who takes a 9-month-old baby? I mean, and also constantly associating the Palestinian narrative with violent slogans and rhetoric.
It doesn't serve Palestinians.
It's a total disservice.
Yeah.
It's just urgent aspirations for Palestinian people. I mean, the whole thing, people have got to stop the hate. It's almost like there's one side and there's the other side. There are so many nuances, Sheila, as you well know. You have been amazing the last 20 months, and I just applaud you for having to deal with all the abuse that I know that you also get. But I just think it's enough. Free Palestine from Hamas. Free the hostages. Free Iran from radical Islam. Peace, coexist, end. The end. It has to stop. And you have to stop hating on us all. Seriously. Because Jews will start to leave the UK. We do not feel safe here anymore.
Well, those who would hate you would say good riddance, but I would say that it would be a terrible day for you to feel you had to do that, and I hope that day doesn't come.
And Sheila, can I just say one thing? It's the gas chambers. It didn't start with the gas chambers.
No, it did not.
It started with rhetoric, like that guy on Saturday.
It started with words.
And people chanting. The way those people chanted, you have no idea how that felt. Listening to that as a Jew. Okay, whatever you might think about the IDF, but what he said afterwards about his previous boss and about and violence.
Violence is the only option. Yeah, I mean he's you know, he has told us who he is. He has told us out of his own mouth repeatedly on that stage who he is, and my sense is he'll live to regret it. But there you go. Maggie, I'm so sorry that happened to you in the street and to the children around you as well. Thanks very much for your call, Maggie, in Muswell Hill. Let's talk to Jeremy, who's called from Holborn. Hello, Jeremy.
Yeah, good afternoon, Sheila. I'm a barrister. I often actually come on as a guest on LBC.
Jeremy Dean.
Yes.
Jeremy Dean.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you. Sheila, first of all, I'd just like to say that your previous caller is reflecting the experiences and concerns of the Jewish community, including myself, across this country. And when people listen to a call like hers, they need to understand that this is what is happening to Jewish people throughout the United Kingdom in 2025. The law needs to be radically altered now. And unfortunately, the powers that be are doing nothing about that. The conversations that you played earlier, or the short clips you played earlier from the Commissioner, Sadiq Khan, are simply lip service to what's required. What we need in this country today is law which categorically demands that if words are uttered capable of damaging the Jewish people, capable of prejudicing the Jewish people, capable of stirring up anti-Semitism, the law must be changed to enforce that today, because someone and some people are going to be killed otherwise very soon.
What changes? You want changes above and beyond existing hate laws and incitement laws, do you?
Sheila, I do, absolutely, and I've been calling for these for a long time, and obviously there isn't time now to rehearse the technicalities of the very limited public order legislation that's in force at the moment. We need law that prevents that. I mean, I didn't quite know what word to use for the person who stood on the stage at Glastonbury. But up to 30,000 people, let's say half of that audience, attached themselves to his comments.
I think it sounded like more than half to me.
Well, Sheila, if it was, then potentially 20,000 people should be guilty of a criminal offence in this country today. Not as the law stands, but calling for death, calling for killing, is not what British society is all about. It's becoming the norm in this country, and the powers that be are standing by and letting it happen. It happened in Nazi Germany, and we all know what followed. And it must stop. And the law is the most lethal weapon.
It's interesting, isn't it, that the pushback, immediate pushback on the the Palestine Action group, and whether they will be prescribed or not. I mean, we'll see whether they're prescribed. It looks, clearly the government is going to attempt to prescribe them, but it looks like it might come to a vote in Parliament based on the initial statement from the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. But already other groups not facing prescription are saying they will openly speak for Palestine Action and say we stand with Palestine Action. If that is tens of thousands of people on marches through central London, what then? A arrest every single person who has a Palestine Action banner? Because we've left a fair few rum ones out there with no arrests already.
Well, Sheila, your question, as always, is a good question, but I'm afraid the answer to that question is yes, because...
Okay, well, I just wondered, because, I guess in law, of course it is. Of course that's the answer, but that's some job, that's some challenge.
Well, Sheila, it may be. Let me just stress, the law as it stands would not militate in favour of arresting 20,000 people. That's why it needs changing. But I'm afraid the Jewish community has lived peacefully in this country for centuries and contributed to British society and has enhanced the life of the United Kingdom. And we, and I include myself, we are now being assaulted, abused, threatened and intimidated. That means 10,000 people being arrested. Should the law change? So be it.
And then what? Can't put them in prison, what do we do?
Well, look, Sheila, that is obviously a $10 billion question, but for my purposes, in terms of speaking to you today, and obviously, everyone knows that you are the voice of reason, I am simply making clear, as a Jew and as a very experienced lawyer, that the law is not protecting the Jewish community, and I'm not to look ahead to the ramifications of changing the law. It just needs to be tightened up to protect us.
Thank you very much indeed, Jeremy. Let's talk more about that another time when we've got more time. We're not focused on this. Thank you very much for your call. That's Jeremy. Jeremy Dean. It's 3:30. I'm going to hear in a few minutes from Martin Lewis, founder of Money Saving Expert, on a couple of things I'm keen to talk about with him. And the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Liz Kendall, is due to speak in the Commons. We'll hear some of what she has to say as well. But your calls to 10345 6060 973. Time for the headlines first. Elizabeth Secker.
What's thought to be the UK's longest-running cold case has been solved with the conviction of a 92-year-old man. Ryland Headley has been found guilty of the rape and murder of 75-year-old grandmother Louise Dunn in Bristol in 1967. The BBC has admitted it should have pulled the broadcast of an act at Glastonbury who led the crowd in chants of death to Israel's military. The corporation has called Bob Villan's comments anti-Semitic and utterly unacceptable. Ofcom says the BBC clearly has questions to answer. The Work and Pensions Secretary is due to outline the government's concessions to the welfare bill after its climb down last week. It's hoped Liz Kendall's statement will win over backbenchers still threatening to vote down the plans in the Commons. LBC understands up to 50 Labour MPs could still vote against the amendments tomorrow. LBC weather, showers for Northern Ireland, Scotland and Eastern England. It's hot elsewhere with highs of 34 degrees.
This is LBC.
It's a chilled summer's day. The twins are splashing in the paddling pool while Mrs. Thing puts her feet up. She's proper chuffed, having saved money on a British Gas boiler service. It's like an MOT for your boiler, just £79, reduced from £109. Bliss. Well, it was nice while it lasted. British Gas, taking care of things. Visit britishgas.co.uk to learn more and see full T's and C's. Sale ends 9th of September 2025. Offer available to new boiler service contract customers.
The John Lewis sale is here. Save up to 50% on selected products. Whether you're getting the garden barbecue ready or choosing holiday outfits, find something you'll love at a price you'll love too. Visit us in-store, online and on the app to find amazing offers in home, tech, fashion, beauty and kids today. Payment plans available. Sale ends 20th of July while stocks last.
If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, what you thought you were getting may not be what you ended up with. From unexpected site fee increases, running costs, a huge depreciation in value, many owners feel they've been missold. If you think this might be you, holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive the compensation you're entitled to. Text ASSIST to 78900 to find out more. That's ASSIST to 78900.
We know that you're always looking for an excuse to get people together and host a picnic. If you need another reason, there's a 3 for £8 offer on a range of deli items at Waitrose. Choose from a range of our picky bits, like crispy sweet corn fritters, Greek-inspired dip trio, and sumptuous sweet potato empanadas. All you've got to do now is decide where to picnic. Shop in-store or order online. Let your summer side out with Waitrose. Selected lines and stores subject to availability. Minimum online spend and charges apply.
At ulesprosperity.com, you buy the car and we pay you up to £600 per month in rental income. For conditions, visit ulesprosperity.com.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
Now, can I just make a point? You might recall earlier on a caller made a reference to Tommy Robinson wanting to kill people. I said at the time that if he wanted a right of reply, we would offer him that, Tommy Robinson. I need to make clear that this was the opinion of a caller and not representative of LBC's view, of course, nor is there any evidence to suggest that the allegations were based on any facts. Important to say that. Now, not quite randomly, I've invited Martin Lewis to speak to me today on the programme, which is always a joy, founder of Money Saving Expert. Not randomly at all, Martin. There are two specific things I'd like to talk about. One is to do with parents who might be facing the school holidays, the summer holidays, and wondering how the heck they're going to afford the whole thing. And another is to do with lifetime individual savings account, LISAs, leases. We'll come to those in just a sec. But I think it's important. Over the summer, we'll look at holiday poverty and the stress of finding things for your kids to do, because an awful lot of things for your kids to do cost a lot of money. But there is some help out there potentially. I just thought it would be good to shine a light on it so parents know how to access it if they're eligible for it.
So, of course, when we normally talk about childcare, we talk about the funded hours that are available for those. And from September, it'll be 9 months up to school age in England anyway. But there are other schemes available. The first one that you should always look at is for anybody who is on universal credit. If you're on universal credit and you're in work and you pay for childcare for under 17s, then as long as it's the right type of childcare, which I'll come on to a moment, you may be able to claim quite a big whack of that back through your universal credit. Up to 85% of childcare costs, up to a maximum of £1,000 a month for one child, or up to £1,770 a month if you have more than one child, which is very substantial. Let's just do briefly what is the right type of childcare.
Yeah.
So it could be nurseries, childminders, holiday or after school clubs, which is what people forget. I mean, even going away summer camps can sometimes count to an extent. What matters is whether the provider is registered in England and Wales by Ofsted, and that includes the Early Years Register and the Childcare Register. In Scotland by the Care Inspectorate, or in Northern Ireland registered with the local Health and Social Care Trust.
So verifiable childcare, not you and your sister-in-law having a bit of a scam going on.
Yeah, no, I'm just setting something up for 3 days. You bring your kids over. You can't do it through that. So it's registered childcare. I mean, it's a very big net. The big one that people forget is there's a free £2,000 a year available via the Working Family Childcare Top-Up Scheme, which I can almost guarantee no one listening will have ever heard of. That's because I have called it by the wrong name. I've called it by the name I believe it should be called, not the name it is actually called. What it's actually called is the tax-free childcare scheme. My problem with that is it's nothing to do with tax apart from the fact it's paid for by the state, and it's not tax-free, which is it was done, set up as a political thing.
You refuse on the grounds of accuracy not to call it that.
Yeah, it's just a terrible name, and actually we've done a lot of research that if we actually called it the Working Family, well, there's a clue to who's eligible in that. Childcare Top-Up, there's a clue to how it works in that. More people would claim it because only... there are 825,000 eligible families of the 1.3 million eligible for it who don't claim. So the vast majority who are eligible don't claim this. Here's how it works. You put 80p into what you can think of as a sort of savings account on gov.uk called tax-free childcare. I know it shouldn't be, called tax-free childcare. And for every 80p you put in, the state tops up by 20p, up to a maximum £500 per quarter, so £2,000 a year. So if you're paying for childcare, whether just for the summer, it's fine just for the summer, or you're paying for the childcare all year round, if you do it via tax-free childcare, and again, it's the same level of what counts as real childcare, if you know what I mean, or registered childcare, although you should always check whether that's tax-free childcare, then you're getting effectively 25% help from the state.
Really good rebate, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, it's huge. It's up to £2,000 a year for free. I'll just read you a success I had from Kieran, who said, I had no idea about tax-free childcare until I got your email highlighting that I could pay for my after-school care via it. Thanks to Martin and your team, I now save around £100 a month. I'm so grateful. Just some I's dotted and T's, because before you get too excited, tax-free childcare is only available for those who are paying for childcare for a child aged 11 or younger, or 16 or younger if they have a disability. To get it, you must earn at least the equivalent of 16 hours a week on minimum wage. Now, because minimum wage depends on your age and whether you're an apprentice or not, let's just say, if you're over 20, it's roughly £10,000 a year of earnings. So you need to earn around £10,000 a year, but neither of you, if you're two parents together or if you're a single parent, you can't earn over £100,000. If you earn over £100,000, it's a cliff edge. You cannot get this. And you shouldn't do this if you're on universal credit, because it could stop your universal credit, which is why I talked about the universal credit help first. If you're on universal credit, get the childcare help through that if you're paying for childcare and if you're in work.
But if you're not, look to this badly named scheme.
If you're not, the badly named scheme, 825,000 eligible families missing out.
Remind us what it's actually called rather than what we'd like it to be called. I hate to make you say it again.
Tax-free childcare. The easy way to remember it, it's not about tax and it's not tax-free. It's called tax-free childcare. There you go, I should be an advertiser.
But it is about childcare, so that's at least one bit that's correct. Yeah.
And the argument is that you're getting the equivalent of what a basic rate taxpayer would get, paying it from pre-tax income. But you don't have to be a taxpayer to get it, because you could earn less than the personal allowance to get it. And if you're a higher or top rate taxpayer, you don't get your tax back because it's only the basic rate. I mean, it was set up as a political thing. Working family childcare top-up. I have discussed with Bridget Phillipson changing the name. It is something under consideration.
We'll let people know if that happens. But in the meantime, if you think you qualify for this, £2,000 a year, nothing to sniff at, tax-free childcare. Check it out. Martin, on the LISA, the Lifetime Individual Savings Account, some people, reports today saying some people who pay into it may end up getting less money out than they put in, a warning from MPs. Why?
Well, I've been campaigning on that for about 5 years, and I think it was my evidence when I gave evidence.
Oops, I'm late to the party, yeah.
So here's what goes on. There is a hideous unfairness with the Lifetime ISA. The Lifetime ISA, for most people, I should say, is a great product. You can put up to £4,000 a year in it, and the state will add £25,000 on top. So if you max it out, you put £4,000 in, you get £1,000 on top each year that you're maxing it out. It can then be used towards a first-time property, so you never have owned anywhere in the world before, or you can leave it until age 60, although I'm not as big a fan of it for retirement savings, so I mainly talk about it as a first-time buyer. The problem with it is if you take your money out for any purpose other than buying a qualifying first-time property or when you're age 60, there's a 25% penalty. Now, Sheila, we worked together years ago, so I know that you can work out if there's a 25% bonus when you put it in and a 25% penalty when you take it out. If you put £1,000 in, what are you left with? It's a very difficult question.
Oh, I hate percentages, but basically you lose what you've put in.
You lose 6.25%. You lose 6.25% of your money.
You lose what was the benefit at the beginning is lost at the end, essentially.
It's
25%. No?
No.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
So no, you lose more than you put in, because 25% on top of 1,000 is not as much as 25% off 1,250 quid, because 25% is a big number. So what actually happens is you lose 6.25% of what you put in. I mean, that is a huge whack. So if you've saved £10,000 into a Lifetime ISA, and you won't get the bonus, but actually you put £10,000 in, you'll get £9,375 back. Now, this is a product for those aged 18 to 39. Now, my issue is, I don't really have a problem with the withdrawal penalty per se. If you're trying to jemmy the system to get the bonus, you're not going to be able to do it. Here's the issue, and it especially affects people in London and the southeast of England. The cap on the property you can buy is £450,000. You cannot buy a property that costs over £450,000. That was set when this launched in 2017, and that has not moved. My issue is, this is a product that the state and the marketing has encouraged young people to save into as first-time buyers to go towards their first home. If, unfortunately for them, they then get priced out and their first home is above £450,000, not only do they not get the bonus, but they have to pay a fine to the state to access their own money. So they've saved 10 grand. They're not getting the £12,500 they're expecting. They're only getting back 9,375
So if
quid.
people have one and are listening to this, what should they do? Think about
Well, if you're almost certainly going to buy a property that costs over £450,000, do not save any more money in unless you're willing to leave it there until you're age 60. My request, what I'm asking to happen, is that anybody who is buying a first-time property, if you're buying one for less than £450,000, we know how it works, it's great, it's a brilliant scheme. If you're buying over £450,000, the withdrawal penalty should be reduced to 20%, not 25%. And what that means mathematically is you don't get the bonus, but you get back what you put in. And I think that would be very fair, so that we are not penalising people for they've been in an area where house prices have gone up, we're going to have to save even more, but they've locked the money into this product, and to get out of it, they pay a fine to the state. And the cost to the state of getting rid of that fine, it's trivial. It's rounding errors on gardening budgets for big departments type stuff. But it's my biggest problem with it, and some people say, yeah, why do we want to help people over £450,000? My biggest problem isn't that. It's because the people who are most put off getting products are those from risk-averse backgrounds, which tend to be people from lower incomes where there's less financial education in the family. So me having to do this massive caveat when I'm trying to talk about getting people to get a lifetime ISA
and start saving, yeah.
And they're saying that you're going to pay a penalty of £450,000. I've spoken to people in Newcastle who are scared of this, even though there's virtually no chance of a first-time buyer property in Newcastle being over £450,000. But because we have to have this massive caveat and this flaw, it's bad for social equality and it's bad for social mobility, and it should be wiped. So that's my issue on the lifetime ISA, which is in this report, I'm pleased to say.
Thank you very much, Martin. Always energising to speak to you, as well as interesting and educational. Thanks a lot, you too. Catch up soon. Martin Lewis, founder of Money Saving Expert. Remember that childcare element that we talked about, it's called tax-free childcare. He doesn't like what it's called. I can see why he doesn't like what it's called, but it is what it's called, and you may well be eligible to make use of it and get yourself £2,000 a year's rebate, essentially, on your childcare costs. Tax-free childcare. 3:45.
Coming up at 4 on LBC, Tom Swarbrick.
As world leaders fawn over Daddy, President Trump wins big in the Supreme Court. After 4, your chance to put your calls and questions to his former comms director, the Mooch.
Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
The people of Britain have bought loads of noise-cancelling headphones. With a Barclaycard Rewards credit card, you could get cash back on eligible purchases and no fees on spending overseas. What you buy is your business. Rewarding you is ours. Subject to financial status, T's and C's apply. Check if you're eligible at barclaycard.co.uk. Representative example, 28.9% APR representative variable and 28.9% purchase rate per annum based on a £1,200 credit limit.
I know what I like to invest in. That's why I choose eToro. With over 7,000 assets, I can invest in big global
British
brands.
stocks.
Wait, what? Big global
British
brands.
stocks.
Big
Local
global
British
brands.
stocks.
Trade everything from local brands to global giants. Yep, all in one app. eToro. Join today.
eToro is a multi-assets investment platform. The value of your investments may go up or down. Your capital is at risk.
The Thameslink train is a place where you have a chance to
That was the
recharge
closest
yourself
thing
and
I've
your
ever
family.
done.
To stretch out, sit back, and when you hear all change please, you'll know you already have. Go with your flow with great deals at thameslinkrailway.com. Terms apply.
The John Lewis sale is here. Save up to 50% on selected products. Whether you're getting the garden barbecue ready or choosing holiday outfits, find something you'll love at a price you'll love too. Visit us in-store, online and on the app to find amazing offers in home, tech, fashion, beauty and kids today. Payment plans available. Sale ends 20th of July while stocks last.
Pia chuma baridi.
Life feels better with a smile. Banning Dental Group clinics. Modern, comfortable and affordable dentistry for all. See online for our price match promise. Keep on smiling.
Keep on smiling, and the whole world smiles.
with Lidl Plus. Get 2 for £7 on burgers, jumbo sausages and more. And get 2 for £3.50 on our plant burgers, veggie sausages and more veggie classics. Download Lidl Plus and start saving this summer today. 18 plus GB only while stocks last. Terms apply. See lidl.co.uk/LBTV. Offer ends 27th of August.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC.
Now, I mentioned a few moments ago some of the things happening in Gaza at the moment. An evacuation order from the IDF for thousands of Palestinians to move from the north of Gaza further down to the south and west because of operations that are going to begin in northern Gaza. And we've also got these noises of, it's probably a bit too dismissive to call them that, but anyway, comments from the American President Donald Trump saying that he has higher hopes at the moment of a ceasefire. Not sure as ever whether that will come to fruition, but we certainly hope so. Riham Jafari joins me, Advocacy and Communications Coordinator at ActionAid Palestine, who's speaking to us from the West Bank, not from Gaza itself. Riham, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you, and thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Tell me this. Has that evacuation or that movement of people actually begun now from Gaza? Not everybody will move, I imagine, but has it started?
Thanks for this question. Yes, against the forced displacement and the evacuation orders are continued for innocent people who were displaced many times or multiple times in Gaza. With a question in Gaza where to go, and some of them refuse evacuation orders because they are sure that they will not find a safe place in Gaza because many of their neighbors, of their friends were killed and were bombed while they are evacuating. And also they know that if they leave or adhere to evacuation order, they will not find any shelters or any tents or any place because the destination that they were ordered to head for is overcrowded with the people, with no shelter items, with no foods, with no water, with no basic necessities available for them. So the people of Gaza continue facing displacement, starvation, bombing, thirst, lack of treatment, as the total blockade is imposed on Gaza for around 4 months, where unlimited aid trucks were allowed to Gaza, which means nothing, which represents a drop in the ocean of humanitarian needs.
And if I can come in on, you mentioned the food there, access to food and other important needs as well. How afraid are people now to go to, if they're able to and if they're near enough to go to these alternative sites for food assistance and other assistance run by the Americans? How willing are they to engage with that, given that we know there has been a great deal of instability around those big moments of people going there?
The situation and the starvation and the use, the weapon of food and the starvation as a weapon of war, leave no alternative for the people, for the starving people, for the hungry people. Some of them go to this U.S.-Israeli scheme for aid distribution, and they know that they will be killed or they will be gunshot while they are heading to this military locations. There is no available options for them. The organization are impeded and their aid is blocked, and the local organizations and the international organizations are unable to deliver food because the crossing borders are blocked. So, and this food centers run by US and Israel is a media tricky, is another indicator for the failure for reaching ceasefire and for adhering to the decision of ICG and the UN Security Council that call Israel to respect the humanitarian aid and the delivery of humanitarian aid and to facilitate the humanitarian aid. So UNRWA in the past and before the placing this mechanism was running 400 food distribution centers. So it reduced the food distribution centers for 4 centers for more than 2 million and 3,000 people.
Can I ask you as well about during the last ceasefire, there were those scenes, you could say happy scenes, but nothing at the moment about what's going on in Gaza is happy, but you could see people at least going however they could. I remember the images on carts, on foot, in overloaded cars, trying to get back north to go home and maybe meet, and they did meet up with relatives or find their home bombed or not bombed. You know, we all saw those dreadful scenes, heartbreaking scenes of people going back home. In the intervening time, in the time in between then and now, how much have people been able to, with all of the difficulties and devastation around them, been able to settle back into northern Gaza? Or did they always feel that another evacuation order, such as the one that's happened today, did they always feel that that would come?
So the people have mixture feelings. Some of them insist to stay, whatever, and regardless the results that they will face or the fate they will face. And some of them continue to leave and to seek other shelters in Gaza City or in the south of Gaza. But you know that many of them prefer to stay in their destroyed houses, in their damaged houses, rather than going to or heading to another destination, because the basic necessities, the safety are not available. The bombing is continuous, and they are sure that they will be killed in their journey of displacement, whether by bombing, whether by thirsty, whether by starvation. So now the reasons and the means of killing of the people of Gaza are different in Gaza, and another additional reason for killing Gaza is added, which is through seeking food through U.S.-Israeli food distribution centers, which was initiated a month ago.
I'll leave it there for now, Reham, but thank you very much for speaking to me today. Reham Jafari, Advocacy and Communications Coordinator at Action Aid Palestine, speaking to us there from the West Bank. Let's hope that talk of a ceasefire comes to something for everybody involved. As promised, I wanted to play you a little of what Liz Kendall is saying in the House of Commons. She's the Secretary of State for the DWP, the Department for Work and Pensions. So the welfare bill is very much in her purview. She is describing in the Commons now and taking questions in the Commons from MPs. She's describing the changes that they have announced to that bill before it comes to the Commons tomorrow. We'll bring you plenty of coverage of the debate in the Commons tomorrow on the welfare bill, and obviously we want to hear from you on it too, especially if you're affected directly by it. Let's just listen to a little of what she said. This is Liz Kendall speaking a few moments ago in the Commons, delivering that statement outlining concessions on disability benefits.
Welfare reform is never easy, but it is essential, because there is no route to equality or social justice based on greater benefit spending alone. The path to a fairer society, where everyone can thrive, where people who can work get the support they need, and where we protect those who cannot work, that is the path we seek to build with our reforms. Our plans are rooted in fairness for those who need support and for taxpayers. They're about ensuring the welfare state survives, so there is always a safety net for those who need it, and so it lasts for generations to come. But above all, our reforms are rooted in our fundamental belief that everyone can fulfill their potential and live their hopes and dreams if we provide them with the right help and support. This is the better future we seek to build for our constituents and our country, and I commend this statement to the House.
Well, there's a lot of passion and energy in there from Liz Kendall. Will it and the changes be enough to get that bill over the line in the Commons tomorrow? We'll find out and bring all of that to you. Just a final text on the question of Bob Villan and Glastonbury. Sam has said, I wasn't there, but I was chanting it anti-Semitic chant that the performer was singing from the staging and the crowd to repeat. I was chanting it from my sofa, perhaps. Funny how people are more outraged by these chants than they are of a genocidal army, he means the IDF, of course, committing war crimes on a daily for the world to see. Tens of thousands of children bombed to smithereens, mass graves, journalists and healthcare workers targeted. Why don't you report on the news from the weekend that the IDF have been receiving orders to shoot at unarmed civilians queuing for aid? Hatred for the IDF doesn't equate to anti-Semitism. Tired tropes rolled out consistently to shut down any criticism. I'm afraid, Sam, wrong. That's it from me for today. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on both Global Player and the LBC app, where you can stay up to date on the stories, top stories and otherwise, and on opinion. Put your news categories in the order you want. Pause and rewind. Rewise, be good. Maybe sometimes rewise it, yeah. Rewind Live Radio and listen to a range of podcasts. Coming up at 6 on LBC, it's Sandra Marr. But now it's time for Tom Swarbrick.
Sheila, thank you very much indeed. Afternoon, folks. Welcome to the show at 4 o'clock.
Death to the IDF! Death to the IDF!
The BBC apologises, Ofcom investigates, Glastonbury acts all shocked. If you want death to the IDF, that means you want Hamas to win, doesn't it? Is that why you support what this bloke said? Also,
there's been a clear attempt to coerce a member of parliament in their national voting intention on a conscience issue.
Holy Communion. The MP who voted for assisted dying denied communion at his church by his priest, who said he was obstinately persevering in sin. We'll hear from that MP.
In recent months, we've seen a handful of radical left judges effectively try to overrule the rightful powers of the president.
As Trump wins bigly in the Supreme Court, lifting legal blockages on his policy of removing birthright citizenship, your chance to put your questions to his former comms director, the Mooch, Anthony Scaramucci, joins me live.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 4 o'clock, a guilty verdict has been reached in what's thought to be one of the UK's longest-running cold cases. Ryland Headley has been convicted of the rape and murder of 75-year-old Louisa Dunn in her home in Bristol in 1967. DNA testing nearly 6 decades later found a match with the now 92-year-old. Louisa's granddaughter, Mary Dainton, says she was in disbelief when she got the call last year.
This is about your grandmother. And I said, have they caught him? This came out. Have you caught him? And she said, we have a suspect.
Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall setting out changes to the government's welfare reform bill in the House of Commons is after the Prime Minister admitted concessions needed to be made after 120 of his own MPs signed an amendment seeking to block it. Ms Kendall's admitted changes to the personal independence payments went too far.
This has caused deep and widespread anxiety amongst existing claimants because they rely on the income from PIP for so many different aspects of their lives. So we will now ensure the new 4-point requirement will only apply to new claims from November 2026.
The BBC says it regrets not pulling the live broadcast of rap duo Bob Villan at Glastonbury. The broadcasters described chants of death to the Israeli military during the band's performance as anti-Semitic and utterly unacceptable. We're hearing the band's been dropped by its talent agency. The head of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Mark Rowley, has told LBC he thinks some people are using international events as a shroud for anti-Semitism.
We have seen, since the events of 18 months or so ago and the sort of terrorist attack in Israel and the Israeli military action that's followed, we have seen a surge in anti-Semitism and some growth in anti-Muslim hatred as well.
In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading down 23 points at 87.75. The pound buys $1.36 and €1.16. LBC weather, a warm and sultry night in the south with lows of 23, drizzle in the north and 11 degrees. Then there's another hot and muggy day in the south tomorrow with fresher drizzly conditions elsewhere, highs of 33 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Elizabeth Secker.
This is LBC from Global. Britain's conversation with Tom Swarbrick.
Just gone 4. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the show. Tom Swarbrick at Drive on LBC. Hope you find you very well indeed. Coming up. Did the professional agitator on that Glastonbury stage say something you agreed with? Is death to the IDF what you want? And why is this bloke trying to compare what he said on stage to his daughter choosing her school dinners? Was this a display of the nasty underbelly of the cuddly diversity is our strength crowd? Plus, it's hot.
Got the tea towels, it's just so can just drape over me all day.
So we want to find the hottest person in Britain in a feature we're calling...
That's hot. 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 This is hot.
Are you the hottest person in Britain? If you are, our reporter wants to talk to you. Actually, it sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? We'll work it out. Details shortly.
Call and WhatsApp message now. 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tom Swarbrick on LBC.
Very good afternoon to you. This hour...
Such a beautiful pole, we thought we'd put it near. I mean, it always looks best when it's near a Naviral. I put it right near. I have a similar pole. They're tapered. They have the nice top.
On Friday, President Trump hailed a decisive victory for his presidency in the Supreme Court, a legal ruling that allows him to attempt to end birthright citizenship for those born to families who arrived in the country, he says, illegally. He was also told that he had a big win at NATO, getting most countries to pledge funding of 5% in GDP to defence in the next 10 years.
They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes, then it's easy to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language.
Daddy is also being debated in the Senate. His biggest win could be in the so-called Big Beautiful Bill of hiking spending and huge tax cuts. Does this fawning of President Trump actually work? Well, not according to the Mooch. Anthony Scaramucci was Trump's communications director for a tumultuous 11 days and is back on LBC this afternoon taking your calls and your questions. Great to see you, Anthony. Thank you very much indeed for coming back on. Does this fawning of him work that we saw Mark Rutte do?
I don't think the fawning works. No, I think it... I think it's embarrassing, and I think he loves it in not the way they think he loves it. They think, oh, let me flatter him, and flattery will get me anywhere with him. That's not what he loves. He loves the fact that you're on bended knee and a supplicant of his. Yeah. In fact, he derides you for it. And the thing he did to the NATO General Secretary was he took a screenshot of the text and put it out on his Truth Social to embarrass him, and that's exactly what he did. And so remember, a good part of the whole Trump thing is the humiliation ritual. It's very important for him to demean the people around him. It's like insecurity power struggle. So no, he doesn't, again, I submit that Carney has done the best job, and Carney just went, rather than combating him, they said they're going to stop the trade talks with Canada because of the digital services tax on the technology companies. And Carney looked at that with his team and said, okay, let's give them that point. Took it back. No drama, no fanfare, no humiliation ritual. So to me, that's what I would do. And I think these guys are embarrassed. And by the way, one last thing, because this is what happens with cognitive dissonance. If you're Mark Rutte, you're telling your friends, well, I need to do this, and I'm the Trump whisperer, and all this stuff. But you're not, actually. You're embarrassing yourself, and he thinks lesser of you. Trust me. Look, remember, I was in the White House for 11 days, but I was on the campaign for 3 years, and I was on the campaign for 11 months. So I know the hanging up the phone call and him looking around in the plane saying, can you believe this guy? This guy thinks his supplicancy to me, because I'm not going to use the word that I want because we're on live show, but this obsequiousness, he thinks this is winning me over. Ha ha.
So that's so interesting to me because the glib interpretation is that Trump is such a buffoon that this stuff works, that squeaking up to him, calling him daddy and taking a note from the king and handing him whatever, that all of that appeals to him, that he likes it and therefore it buys you favour.
That's different though, Tom. The king thing is different. See, that's different. So Stormer's actually number 2. Stormer's a silver medalist in the Trump relationship.
You think that was good? He wouldn't have. He wouldn't have said. So the door shuts on Keir Starmer. He wouldn't have gone round to his team and gone, "God, that guy, what a buffoon."
No, because he's figured out that Trump has a Scottish mom. He's an Anglophile. He likes the pomp and circumstance associated with the royal family. He's a monarchist, and so Stormer, that was a diplomatic tool. So that's different. He'd
have respected that, you think?
Yeah, there's a level of obsequiousness to that, but it's not layered with the daddy and the... Yeah. I mean, listen, man, on my podcast, I was fake throwing up, reading Mark Ruddy. I was like, I was finding the vomit bag on the airplane, right? I mean, come on. It's ridiculous, right? But Prime Minister Stormer, different. Stormer's like, this guy likes the pomp and circumstance. He loved going to Buckingham Palace. Let me make sure that the king takes care of him the same way Queen Elizabeth did. That's different, in my opinion.
Yeah. 03456060973 is the number. Anthony very kindly agreed to take calls till 5 o'clock on all things Americana, but there'll be some, I suspect, some read across from some of the events in the UK to the US as well. Let's go to Joe, first of all, in North Ayrshire. Joe, you're on with the Mooch. Your question.
Oh, I'm privileged to speak to the Mooch. Thank you, Mooch, for all you're doing. Just a slightly tongue-in-cheek, but there are social media memes going around saying that because of Trump's immigrant wives, his own children would actually be party to this law that he's brought out about birthright. And I just wondered if you could kind of firm up, whether there's any truth in that because his ex-wives, his wives, ex-wives, whatever, weren't US citizens when they had Trump's children, would his children theoretically fall under this new law?
Good question. So just take us back to that Supreme Court.
I've actually looked at this, so it's a good question, but I didn't hear her first name, by the way.
Joe. It's Joe.
Joe. So it's a really good question. So I've actually looked at this. I'll put my legal beagle hat on and tell you that it would be a technical yes, that it would fall under that. And I think that's an issue. So there's some irony there, right? Because and there's also a little bit of hypocrisy because a lot of people have come in as immigrants. I don't think the proposed law that they're suggesting actually comes into place. That would be one of the reasons why it would come into place. But I think what is that issue is birthright citizenship. It's very vague on birthright citizenship. What the court was trying to do is saying that you may not like the president and you may think the president's acting outside of his authority, but you also then can't check him by acting outside of your authority. Okay, so that was a judicial restraint decision. They left the birthright citizenship issue off the table for now. And I'm going to make a prediction here on this show that birthright citizenship thing never really manifests, that we get to 2028 and Trump is out of office and birthright citizenship is still in place in the U.S. But Joe is correct. If they did go into that situation, you would run the risk that a Democrat could get into office and say, okay, well, we're going to apply this mechanism and these rules to Trump's own family. So I don't see it happening for that and many other reasons.
But that's, Joe, great question, by the way. And this all comes out of the Supreme Court ruling on Friday that Trump hailed as a massive win, which I guess in one sense, Anthony, shows the power of the Trump presidency, that because it's packed, the Supreme Court is packed with Republicans, he can win there quite regularly too.
He's lost there, though, too. He's won some and he's lost some. That's why they're critical of some of the picks that Trump put in. I mean, the court has done a reasonably good job, frankly. Remember, I've long studied the court, took constitutional law in law school. They've done a reasonably good job. What happens is the left-wing media will go crazy if they side with Trump, but if you actually read the decisions are pretty measured. Even the immunity decision, I said this on the Rest is Politics, so the immunity decision is fairly measured. It gets exaggerated in the media. You know, he can get put in jail. There's certain things that he's doing. He could end up in jail. There is a reason why at Ladbrokes and other places there's a 15% chance he gets ousted from the presidency because he's doing things. He's breaking some rules. You have an emoluments issue with him. He's made several $1 billion since the start of the presidency for himself and his family. There are things that he's doing that are, outside of the norms of the presidency. But I think the court has, in general, done a pretty good job. General.
03456060973 is the number to get your call through to the Mooch on LBC this hour. You can also watch us. We're streaming live on the LBC app, so you can see Mr. Scaramucci. What guitar is that behind you?
I'm glad they dressed up for you. Yeah. I was a little nervous when I'm looking at you with this. Is that like a Marks and Spencer polo?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's exactly that. She's next.
Okay, yeah. Yes. I like it.
What's the guitar behind you? What's that?
So that's actually from One Republic. I don't know if you know that band. So I hired these bands for my conferences. So I've hired Maroon 5, One Republic. I got a lot of guitars in there. I don't play the guitar, but I got a lot of signed guitars. You know, when you pay a lot of money for a band to play at a private event, they give you a
they get something out of it, more than just music.
It's a very expensive guitar behind me.
Yeah, I bet. Hey, on a musical theme, can I bring you some breaking news? This from the Deputy Secretary of State of the State's Department in relation to a band called Bob Dylan, who you might have heard caused a bit of a stir this side of the Atlantic. They were, Bob Dylan, due to play in America. I can bring you this from the Deputy Secretary of the State Department, who says that they have revoked the US visas for the members of the Bob Dylan band in light of their hateful tirade at Glastonbury, including leading the crowd in death chants. Christopher Landau says foreigners who glorify violence and hatred are not welcome visitors to our country. Do you think a Biden presidency would have stopped these guys from coming?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that's a governmental overreach. But that's a big flex in the culture war. Listen, I'm not an anti-Semite. I don't like the remarks that are being made. I think you're taking a political issue and you're conflating it with anti-Semitism. If you don't like the government of Israel, you don't like what the government is doing, don't cross over the bridge into anti-Semitism. Make the argument related to policy. Make the argument related to the inhumanity of war. I mean, war is ultimately inhumane. It's not, there's war crimes going on in the Ukraine, and I'm sure that there are things going on that are regrettable in Gaza, but don't go over the line into anti-Semitism. Having said that, I think that America is a free society, and I don't think we should be punishing people. We can denounce them and so forth, but I don't think revoking the visa is the right thing. If anything, it just creates more bitterness and a greater divide. But remember something about this administration. They're fighting a culture war. And so that plays to their base. When they do things like that, when they advertise that there are transgender athletes playing in women's sports, even though there's a very small group of them, when they do that, it ignites Trump's base. And that's something that the base would find satisfying. But again, it's breaking the norms of a system that has made this country fairly free, very productive economically, very innovative, and frankly aspirational. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I take you to my neighborhood, Tom, where I grew up. I've been able to do some pretty exceptional things because I live in America, and I think when they do stuff like this, they're curbing that, and I don't like it. By the way, I denounce the anti-Semitism. I also think there's a balance that you have to have as a leader.
You wouldn't be hiring this band for your private event?
No, I would definitely not have a signed guitar from that band, and they should probably issue an apology.
03456060973. Kieran's in Bracknell. Kieran, you're through to the Mooch.
Thank you. Mr. Scaramucci, thank you for the... Will Daddy take the opportunity to step in and denounce all these children fighting in the playground, to reinvigorate his Nobel Peace Prize by passing an executive order that United States will step in because of what happened in the last 4 days with the starvation children and whatnot, that he would step in to do the peacekeeping thing and thereby reinvigorating his Nobel Peace Prize efforts.
This is in the Middle East, Kieran, you're talking about specifically, yeah?
It's a really...
I'm talking about Gaza.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I know from, my sources, people are still pretty close to, that's on the table. I think what's also on the table, what concerns Donald Trump, and he's put this out on Truth Social, is the... I'm trying to measure my words here, but I believe there are some criminal indictments against Prime Minister Netanyahu. Yep. And if I'm wrong about that, Tom, I want to...
No. He was expected to go to court.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm factually accurate. If not, I'll retract the statement. But I think the president is worried about those because I think whatever the ups and downs that he's had with Bibi Netanyahu, he likes that relationship and he wants Bibi to be cut a pass or a get out of jail free card. And so what's at issue, what's he's balancing, definitely wants that Nobel Peace Prize. He's a vainglorious guy, but he doesn't want to put the peacekeepers in place because he thinks it may hurt Bibi politically right now in his own country. So I think step one would be how can he help Bibi, and then step two would be that other idea that you're bringing up, which I know they're talking about.
On the Trump,
he definitely wants the Peace Prize, guys. And I find it funny because, he competes with President Obama. It's 10 years later, but he's still competing with him.
I want to talk about Iran in a minute. Just on what Trump said about Netanyahu on Friday, he posted, "It is quote insanity." Doing what the out-of-control prosecutors are doing to Bibi Netanyahu. I am going to assume, Anthony, and maybe it's unfair of me to assume this, but I'm going to assume Trump doesn't actually read doesn't know the detail of what's actually happening to Netanyahu, does he? Or does he?
No, but he's relating it to himself, right? So Trump's whole big message is the warfare through the lawfare, right? Trump is basically saying, if you remember this time last year, Trump was about 15 miles south of me at a New York City criminal court, yes, where he was indicted and he was eventually convicted on 34 criminal counts. Now, I always make this argument because you can study this in history. When you're even if you have malevolent political figures, when you're going after them politically, you can actually galvanize support around them. Okay, that would be, and again, I'm not comparing Trump to Hitler, but I'm just giving examples from history. 1924, Hitler goes to jail. He becomes more powerful. Positive people, letters from a Birmingham jail. Martin Luther King Jr. goes to jail. He becomes more powerful. Nelson Mandela, 27 years in a South African jail, he becomes more powerful. So to me, I think what Trump is basically saying there is be careful. You don't want to be in a system, guys, where the political opponents are building jail cells for each other, depending on which party is in and out of power. Even if they're bad guys, I think it hurts the standing of the country, and it puts you down a really bad road. I was not in love with those criminal indictments against Trump last year.
Do you, you mentioned the Ladbrokes market in Trump being ousted for the presidency, and you're a money guy. Would you put money on Trump ending up in prison?
No, not prison. Prison, no. I'd say that it's not. It's you're off zero that something bad could happen to him in the presidency because he's doing things. Remember, there's an expression, that the fish thinks from the head down. So if the leader is breaking societal norms and the leader is going after a good grift for himself and his family, it's going to exponentially permeate down chain to the other people working with the leader. And so then all of a sudden you could end up with a really bad outcome. Now, Governor Christie, you guys may or may not remember him, but 12 years ago, his staff decided that they would slow down the traffic coming over the George Washington Bridge to get at one of the local leaders. And so they slowed it down, they manipulated the traffic, they put up cones, and I actually think that cost Chris Christie his future as a political aspirant because, and by the way, I believe Chris, he probably didn't tell them to do that, but they saw his behavior at the top and it gave them license. Okay, and so Trump is creating a culture of grifting. And so that could really tip over into something really bad, which may affect him. Like right now, people think he's impervious, but he may not be in 18 months after the political midterms in November of 2026.
Well, interesting.
So it's not zero, guys. It's not zero.
Interesting you mentioned that, because John's in Reading with a similar, with a question on a similar line. John, hi, you're through to the Mooch.
Hi there. My question is, do you believe that if Donald Trump or / the Republican Party loses the midterms, Trump will follow everything legally and basically follow the law? And may I add also, there's a mayor race in New York at the moment. Do you seriously believe that Trump, there's been word of it, whether or not he will actually deport him if he becomes mayor?
Okay, so I think let's start with that one. I think if Zelensky becomes mayor, I don't think it'll be impossible to deport him. I think that Trump has very good instincts and he could threaten that, but I don't think that would ever happen. So I'll start there. When you say follow the law, Trump is always up against the law. He's always on the margin. He goes into the gray zone, and sometimes he goes over the chalk mark outside of the boundaries of the law. So I don't think any of that will change one way or the other. I think what's at real issue are the Democrats. So the Democrats, I think these two questions are very interesting, sir, because they are conjoined in the following way. The Democrats are listening to what's going on in New York, and they're going to lurch into hard left socialism. And again, I'm not defining the socialism in the United States similar to European socialism, because they're very different, and the United States citizens think of it very differently, but I think that would be a terrible mistake for the Democrats. This is a center-right country, whether people like that or not. That's my 61-year observation. And if they elect this gentleman, he's a socialist, and they take that as a cue to go further to the right, Trump will win the midterm elections. He'll probably gain houses, seats in the House and seats in the Senate. So I think those things are connected. But yeah, no, he's not a law follower, guys. He's a up against the law, stretch the law, push the limits of things, break norms, and trigger people.
On the point of, as you described it, the sort of the socialism point, and where the Democrats go next, I noticed that you put out a tweet, or you quote tweeted a guy called Sean McGuire, who said, "We need more billionaires and fewer communists." And you said, "Amen, the politics of envy, more opportunity and purpose for all. I grew up in a country of aspiration," kind of to the point that you were making earlier, Anthony. But that would be if the Democrats saw an open field there, i.e. to say we've got too many people who are far too wealthy, we need to redistribute the money far more evenly, you think that would be a political mistake for them?
No, well, I think it would be a grave error. It would also hurt the country. So, I mean, the country. I'm going to be very honest with you. I don't like the unequal opportunity in the country. If there's any socialist bone in my body, I would like a rich country like this to develop a broader, sturdier platform of equal opportunity. Meaning, if there are kids in urban areas that are not getting nutrition, guys, we have kids in this country. 40% of the elementary school students are saying they're having a hard time in school because they're going to school hungry. Okay, this is a rich enough country. We should be figuring that out. So I'm about a platform of equal opportunity, but I am not about equal outcomes. We have to have unequal outcomes, incentivized outcomes. If you're going to work harder than me, you deserve to make more than me. If you have a better idea or a better mousetrap than me, you deserve more. I want to get out of the politics of envy, but I think what's happening in the country now is the billionaires have lost their what I would call the noblesse oblige. They've lost their sensibility about taking care of other people. 80 years ago, the very rich in this country got together with the politicians. They came up with the GI Bill. Okay, and this put a lot of poor kids who were in the American military into college. They were able to transition from working class jobs into white collar jobs, and it burgeoned the middle class of America. So this middle class brand in America has been damaged due to indifference by billionaires. And so the messaging from the socialists is very clear. The billionaires don't care about you. They're trying to become trillionaires. So let's break them down and redistribute the wealth. I think that that's a false promise. And you can look to a lot of countries that have tried that. There's a country 90 miles to the south of us that tried that. It's been a dilapidated mess for 60 years. That's the country of Cuba. So to me, I don't want to go in that direction. But I do believe that we are on the precipice of breaking something if we have this wan indifference to lower and middle income people from the very wealthy. So again, you can have your money, but let's start taking care of more people and giving more people aspirational opportunity in the society. I think that's the message. And let me just give one historical comment. Teddy Roosevelt understood this better than anybody. He was actually a Republican, and he was the father of progressivism. He called it progressivism. He broke up some of the trusts, like the oil companies, some of the banking trusts. He went to the local building people and the tenements. He said that these apartments have to be made better. They can't collapse on each other because you can't take advantage of the poor. And he paved the way for the architecture of the middle class. And so every once in a while we get robber barons in place that overly flex on the government, and they cause a problem in the society. So we're there now, but going towards socialism would be the wrong answer. The society needs renewal. It needs a re-engineering of the social contract, but I think that would be a leap too far, and it would really hurt people.
03456060973 is the number. Anthony Scaramucci, the former White House Director of Communications under President Trump, is here taking calls until 5 o'clock. We haven't even got into Iran yet, which is astonishingly poor from me, given that we've had half an hour of your time, Mr. Mooch. So we'll get into Iran, we'll get into questions of foreign policy in a few moments' time. Plus, of course, the breaking news this afternoon that the band Bob Dylan have been banned from going to the United States. They've had their visas revoked. We'll get into the details of that in a few moments as well. Tom Swarbrick here on LBC. 4:30, news headlines now. Elizabeth Secker.
The BBC says it regrets not pulling the broadcast of rap group Bob Dylan at Glastonbury. It's understood the pair had been dropped by their talent agency after they chanted death to the IDF on stage on Saturday night. Meanwhile, the US State Department has withdrawn their visas ahead of a planned tour. What's thought to be the UK's longest ever unsolved cold case has now been solved with the conviction of a 92-year-old man. Ryland Headley has been found guilty of the rape and murder of grandmother Louise Dunn in her home in Bristol in 1967. It's been confirmed anyone who's currently receiving personal independence payments won't be affected by changes to the eligibility criteria. The Work and Pension Secretary says she's acknowledged real concern among disabled people as she defended watered-down welfare reforms. LBC weather, a warm and sultry night ahead for southern regions with a low of 23 Celsius, but there's drizzle.
Yani we mzee, Kuja watu wa gate. Gate inaja kufungua simulia kama Ama imefungwa nidanganye. Ilifungwa hiyo gate ilikuwa na kama kutoka asubuhi. Nini? Wewe umeisukuma kutoka ukuji, umeisukuma. Ama uende sasa ukaangalia, enda sasa ukaangalia. Ukikakosa na kuwekea 100. Nilipigia ngesi kwa kwanza ya kumbaya.
Mata inobaki.
Bana.
Hakijafanya.
Ngoja
anamtiki kesho. Au ende. Kesho ama.
Ndo mama sasa ino sasa hii.
Ni ana.
Ndishi. Wewe mulo.
Mula. Neno?
Umemute. Sasa kwa kitu kama kamechora mic hapo. Naongea. Mulo.
Mula. Hai naona unataka mgeni ni man. Hai, siku za mwisho kama kawaida. Wewe ndio brother, wewe ndio brother. Wewe na mwisho. Sawa, changamka. Oh my.
Molwa. Sasa hapa hizo umetuma ni gani zinafanywa? Ni gani zinafanywa? Gani sasa baba? Gani?
Sura yangu unasikia unaangalia Facebook pale.
Sawa. Kwa sawa zinazosomeka.
Mama ana mimi ngogo bwana nitumia maswali kwani hata mimi siwezi kutumia maswali. Na kufika alafu wewe mzee umepangishaje kwani? Sasa jana hapo enda zaidi hapo. Lazima hizi vijana hata niko na wasiwasi sana. Kiamkia tu hivi wanawaza nikatuma nilikuwa kwa kinoma. Hapo huko akikuja usiku nitamwambia kuja. Sawa. Niliona waje kukupangisha. Haina wasiwasi. Bwana kula nini mama? Nika mgumu, tukule nini jana? Yaani ndio nikipeleka mahindi. Kitia majioni tukichukua unga. Nikiomba Wednesday nitume. Kidogo kupeleka mwana shule. Kwa hivyo by Thursday nitakuwa sawa.
Tutaende huko ndio.
Ai, wewe. Ati mtaendea ataendea hapa? Ataendea ama mtaendea?
Ataendea.
Alijua. Unasikia mama, unasikia ni brother hapa. Uliniambia nikikuja huku nimsikize. Sasa hiyo ndamsikiza mama. Hizi mia mola. Hizi mia mola kama hivi. Mwenye atakuja tu atakuja nayo. Sijui ni nani atakuja.
Haya.
Kama kuna mtu anakuja tutawaambia. Sawa. Kazi ni mingi. Kazi ya nini? Kazi ya nini?
Molo anakuambia nini? Molo anakuambia nini? Nasikia Molo akikwambia.
Anasema wewe? Na kazi hapo Molo asikusikia kipiga simu alisema wewe. Alikuwa anavumilia ukiona akifanya kazi lazima istahili. Ndio kilikuwa kinaumana mbaya sana. Kwani haijatoka maharagwe? Maharagwe imetolewa? Na nini? Sasa hii shamba sijatuamba. Sijagonga za kule. Sasa hapa bado unajua nini jua huko aliwaje vizuri. Ndio. Naandika tuone kama sio huko. Leo jua limaliza kufunga. Drip. Drip. Na mapost. Zile za kuchonga. Za kuchonga ni gani hizo? Mimi tulikuwa tunachonga hapo na pale. Aliangalia na ni ya kuteremka ile ya fence. Unaijua wewe ile jina yuko kwa chief. Wewe iko sawa? Umeunda? Nilijua tena na mimi ya mwezi tuanga zaidi tunauka. Molo. Unasema nini? Unasema nini Molo? Unganisha nini? Unganisha nini? Nani alikwambia? Storia ya kuunganisha. Babako. Bado sijaelewa. Hadi umenunua yangu unataka kutengenezewa?
Nini?
Gani?
Bado.
Unanunua? Unapanga kazi wewe? Sina ng'ombe. Uze ng'ombe ununue. Uza ng'ombe ununue gari. Gari kipi?
Kuelea gani?
Atunia gari ngapi?
Zalisha.
Za njona? Hiyo mwagi ni mingi Mulwa. Ama ni kadogo? Ni mingi hiyo mwagi. Mwagi. Ni kadogo. Kwa hivyo ni ya matatu fanya. kumbe mko shambani bado madhe. Uliniambia utaniangalia kuku zangu zibaraje. Ati anatoka wote mpaka na tudogo. Uliona kama kuna tudogo ile size tu yenye inakula mapapai. Ya nini madhe? Sasa kwa dia sasa kamjuaje? Kamjuaje ni kama anaingia watu mashamba. Oh, sahi, naona kama sahi. Kama sahi. Maarabu. Baadhi na zaidi. Gogo nzampata. Watu. Kwa nikiambia deni nani deni nimwambia angekuwa huko. Anjua mengi ya majibu. Sio hapa yeye. Hata kama ni hapa yeye. Mahali hapo hapa shinda kwa shinda. Adoki. Akiachiliwa atatoroka. Marabia kutoroka. Sasa. Kibani aje na wale wako town. Shida ni chakula wale. Ni hata na wapesi. Sijui jaribu kufanya hesabu. Nadia analiangalia kule. Ni wao anajua nikaenda huko nilikuwa nitawaangalia. Unaje hata shida. Bana mnaje anataka. Mnaje ana shida. Nilikuwa nimeniambia kibana naye atakuwa wapi. Ulienda nguo mnaje wewe? Leo uliona kama kuna kuku hapo. Sasa anashinda kama amekuja kwa wow. Sawa. Najua kuona hapa hapo ndani. Ndio hapo. Sasa sijui nini utafanya nje ya hawa wanataka wateremke hapa waweze sana. Unaona kama kaida watu wanaacha kuelewa kile hapa hakuna wakienda kwanza leo kama leo na kesho hapa mambo sana. Leo hiyo masaa kuanzia saa 10 italia naenda hiyo. Kesho kutoka asubuhi mpaka usiku saa 3 tutaendelea na mchana. Sasa hata kwa jina Mungu nasikia kichwa sijui. Sijui mimi siwezi rejea kitu. Nitibeba niende na hiyo mambo yote nazo zileta hapa, kuna mtu akusikia. Mashida natoka kwa hivi kitu shida. Sasa ile ukapole pia zaidi mashida sasa. Shida ni kama mjuaji katoroka. Katoroka. Kwa hiyo siku unajua aliniambia walimwacha kwa kile. Ndio anawaza hiyo siku ile.
Alimwacha wapi?
Kwa juu. Wakienda hiyo.
Nani anakuja kutaka huko wapi?
Nani anataka kuletea?
Unasufanya hivyo basi.
Nimletea lele kidogo.
Ama mletee kake kwanza uone vijana kama mmoja. Mpe kamoja kake kwanza. Lakini kamoja walikuwa na stress. Ndio chakula ndio hili iko.
Chakula ni shida. Bado watu Kenya wa chini. Kwa chini.
Sawa basi kama unataka.
Waga kilanga. Kitu kama hiyo.
Zoesha nyama. Sawa. Sawa mami. Nipatie huyo mulo kwanza. Mulo mulo unajua ile nyingine uje nilipa. Kitu gani? Wewe maze? Maze? Unataka kitu birthday yangu ni hii. Ya Julai. Unajua? Shauri yako kuitisha. Shauri yako. Hii sikujua. Olive. N11. Wengine imepita hivyo. Yangu isipite, waonyeshe mimi ni baba yako. Waonyeshe. Wajue. Molwa. Unasema nini? Usijali. nitakuonyesha mahali unamkamatia.
Sawa.
Haya, chonjo.
Sawa, fanya mpango basi.
Mpango ya nini tena mulo? Mpango gani tena?
Ukweli, mpango ukweli.
Haya, weka jitu, weka jitu.
Sawa. Sikuwa na haraka.
Nachukua na haraka na uwekangi unanipanganga tu. Aji? Sawa, jitetee kabisa. Nadhani kwa hiyo msitu utoki, si ndio? Sawa. Kilometer 400 and something. Let me cover them. Usaje kusikiza redio bana, redio lazima bana.
Point out to him that his favourability ratings are, well, when I asked him it was minus 46. I think the last number I saw this week was minus 56, which is a record low for him. He started on about 0. And I said, does this bother you? Do you worry that neither your party nor the country seem pleased with the direction of travel? And he said, look, he keeps coming back to this. I mean, I think I described it in my piece as a sort of the parable of the tortoise and the hare. He keeps coming back to this idea that this is a slow process. It's got to be steady. They're not going to get everything right. A lot is going wrong in this country all at once. And that it is a bit of a plea for patience, really. I don't think the electorate is very patient. I think we're seeing that in the polling. I don't think Parliament is very patient, but he does, and I think he does have a bit of a point here that you can't expect results in a year. You probably can't expect them in 4 years, but certainly within a year you can't expect the magic wand to have been waved. And there is a lot to be done, and it can't be done overnight. But he does keep seeming to get the politics of certain issues wrong, which I think is an impediment to him. We've had grooming gangs, we've had winter fuel, now we've got these disability cuts, and if he keeps having these crises, then it sort of weakens the whole project, really.
It absolutely does. Well, listen, Josh Glancy, who has spent a long time interviewing the tortoise, thank you very much indeed for talking to me. Now, coming up, yet another controversy for the BBC, but how exactly have they managed to get themselves into such a mess this weekend? The former head of BBC Television News joins me. Time now, 6:30, and Elizabeth Second as your headlines.
Police have started a criminal investigation into the performance of Bob Vylan at Glastonbury Festival on Saturday. Officers are looking into what appeared to be anti-Semitic comments and chants made by the frontman Pascal Robinson Foster. Earlier, the BBC admitted it should have pulled the broadcast. Belfast rap group Kneecap's performance is also being investigated. The government's U-turn on welfare cuts will cost taxpayers around £2.5 billion by 2030. The Work and Pension Secretary's laid out the concessions she'll make as she tries to convince more than 100 Labour rebels to back the bill. An amber heat health alert has been extended to cover more areas of England, with temperatures set to reach the mid-30s. It now applies to the West Midlands and Yorkshire and the Humber regions until Wednesday morning. LBC weather, a warm and sultry night ahead for southern regions, with temperatures staying in the low 20s, but there's drizzle in the north and lows of 11 degrees.
LBC This Morning on Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Why would you hire Bob Villain, this vile duo, who got formed, by the way? 20-minute tirade. I won't read it all to you. Foul language about music executives, bald-headed, F-words, C-words, everything else. All going saying, we're live on the BBC, everyone chanting and screaming how hilarious it is. Where was someone to press the kill button? Just pull the plug. There's no conversation to be had here. It's done. It's out. Ridiculous. Why are you so utterly inept or incompetent? When might there be some action?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio, on Global Player, and the new LBC app.
When you're smiling. Banning Dental Group clinics with over 5,000 top-rated Google reviews. Keep on smiling.
Think of a breakfast muffin with sausage and egg. Yep, that's the one. You can see it, can't you? Deep in your mind. Sausage, egg, cheese, muffin. I don't even need to say its name, do I? Breakfast done properly. Served until 11 a.m.
It's a chilled summer's day. The twins are splashing in the paddling pool while Mrs. Thing puts her feet up. She's proper chuffed, having saved money on a British Gas boiler service. It's like an MOT for your boiler, just £79, reduced from £109. Bliss. Well, it was nice while it lasted. British Gas, taking care of things. Visit britishgas.co.uk to learn more and see full T's and C's. Sale ends 9th of September 2025. Offer available to new boiler service contract customers.
The people of Britain love their ice baths. They've bought loads of them. With the Barclaycard Platinum, they could also save with 0% interest for up to 24 months on purchases, which is a nice, warm feeling. What you buy is your business. Helping you pay less interest is ours. Subject to financial status, T's and C's and exclusions apply. Check if you're eligible at barclaycard.co.uk. Representative example, 24.9% APR representative variable and 24.9% purchase rate per annum based on a £1,200 credit limit.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:34. Here is the news from the BBC. A couple of foul-mouthed, self-promoting exhibitionists have said things on a music stage designed to make everybody angry and help them sell more albums. They have succeeded. Everybody is very angry, and their names are now much better known. They have been helped in this endeavour by the BBC, which seems not to have noticed a storm of hate speech billowing out of Glastonbury and cut the live feed. The BBC is very sorry. The BBC is always very sorry. Let's talk now to Roger Mosey, the former head of BBC Television News and currently master of Selwyn College, Cambridge. Roger, had you been in charge this week, how angry would you have been at the way the BBC handled this?
Oh, I would have been pretty cheesed off. I think, though, in fairness, you played the clip over Nick Ferrari a moment or two ago, and the point about the live feed and cutting it isn't totally simple, because in Glastonbury you've got lots of free speech issues, so the point where the group are chanting Free Palestine is okay. 5 seconds later, they chant something completely different, which is absolutely wrong. And you've got to make that split-second decision. So that's the problem. However, there's no doubt it was unacceptable, and the BBC's risk assessment seems to be somewhat wrong.
Well, that's what puzzles me, because I think almost anybody aged 5 years old or more would have spotted that this was going to be a problem. You know, there's Glastonbury, there's this group, Kneecap, for instance, who have caused all sorts of problems before, landed in court. There is Gaza. There is this huge likelihood of somebody saying something deeply offensive, and yet the BBC seems to have stumbled into this without really thinking about it.
Yes, and I've heard people say today there's plenty of evidence that Villain had made comments before and behaved at a festival in America in a way the BBC should have been worried about. And after all, they were putting them on air live at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, albeit on the iPlayer, and that seems to me to be a failure of risk assessment. You must have taken a different view, as they did with Kneecap, and Kneecap were not allowed to broadcast live, and if there is controversy and issues around the group that are going to be too high risk, they shouldn't have done it. As soon as they did start broadcasting that totally unacceptable language, the plug should have been pulled.
plug should have been pulled every single time something like this happens, because it's not the first time. The BBC has an inquiry and says it's going to look into it, and heads never roll. There's that old BBC expression, deputy heads should roll. Do you think somebody should go for this?
Look, I'm guessing here and speculating, but Glastonbury is run by music and entertainment, and it's probably asking quite a lot of a music and entertainment producer who may not be particularly senior to make that call the moment it happens. So I think compliance, that old broadcasting standards thing, really chops in, and you should have senior people who are there monitoring as much as they can, people alerting when there's anything potentially problematic, and that should be the lesson. And after Jonathan Ross and Russell Brand got the BBC into a lot of bother best part of 20 years ago, compliance became a big thing in the BBC, and on these major national events, the BBC has to make its compliance better. It's as simple as that.
Simple as that. Roger Mosey, I'm sure it wouldn't have happened in your time. Thank you very much indeed for talking to me. Now, here's a story which I think for many of you will matter more, perhaps even should matter more than the political crisis we've been talking about. We aren't having enough babies. We aren't replacing ourselves. The fertility rate in England and Wales has now fallen to 1.44 children per woman, the lowest since records began in 1938, and below the 2.1 needed to keep the population steady. When I was younger, people used to talk about the Italians having this problem, and the Russians and the Japanese. Well, now we have it too. Short term, that means a working age population too small to properly support the burgeoning number of pensioners, and probably too heavily taxed as they try to. Long term, it means, well, you know what it means. Let's begin now by talking to Dr. Alice Evans, who's a senior lecturer in social science and author of The Great Gender Divergence. Before we talk about what's going on, in long term, it means we die out.
Certainly there is a risk of depopulation, but I think I'm much more concerned about the immediate economic catastrophe worldwide.
And you would say this is fundamentally an economic problem for people around the Western world, but we're talking particularly about Britain today.
It's happening all over the world. In China, the total fertility rate is 1.1, Puerto Rico 0.9, Chile 0.9, everywhere, Turkey 1.5.
The only place where it's not happening is sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes.
And the big difference between us and them is they don't have smartphones, they don't have screens, and they're still mingling in person.
I think that's a likely explanation. So I think that certainly this is happening everywhere all at once, and we need to pay attention to what are the global drivers and also the local variation. And sub-Saharan, so in much of the world, you and I have this vast improvement in the quality of leisure. So you and I can play video games or go on Instagram or watch whatever TV we like.
But we don't bump into each other in the saloon bar as we might once have done.
Certainly. So that's a certain friction that we've seen a decline in socialising. We've also seen a rise in singles, whereas people in sub-Saharan Africa, they don't have that big leisure and entertainment shock. So maybe...
Kitu inafaa ikimbie bana.
I was going to ask, but you talked about the local or near-at-hand factors.
Because
there seems to be, when I talk to people, a big economic issue here. Young people simply, they can't get housing, they can't get onto the housing ladder, they don't feel life is improving economically, they're really worried about all of that, and the idea of settling down and taking the risk, the economic risk of having children feels too much.
I think there is certainly a cost of living crisis in Britain and in many parts of the world, but I don't think, and certainly people's proclivity to make a massive financial, time and emotional investment might be less if they feel their future is uncertain and they themselves might be depressed or anxious. That said, I don't think economics can be the sole explanation, because we see this very rapid change happening everywhere at once, even in but not in the poorest countries, right? So that's why I'm thinking it must be something else.
It's really worth reflecting how extraordinary this is, because when I was young, there was a lot of talk about overpopulation and the population bomb and the demographic bomb. There's just far too many of us on the planet to sustain, and it seems to be going into reverse. Perhaps there is some kind of natural self-correction going on.
I think that's a major issue that we overpopulated, and particularly in India, for example. So people were hugely concerned about overpopulation, so they instilled in schools, in health clinics, have fewer kids, and now the average Indian woman only wants 1.9 kids. But if you don't have that youthful population to sustain your older people, it's an economic crisis for India.
Thank you very, very much indeed. Really, really.
Within 2 minutes,
also, of course, the technological and social changes. Let's talk to Mackin Murphy, a scientist who specialises in human mating behaviour and the cost Cost of Species podcast.
It's certainly the case that much has been made of dating apps, and it's also true that there are some pernicious qualities that are not unique to the apps, but certainly exacerbated by them. One thing that we see is that on these apps, there is a skewed operational sex ratio, such that there are many more men than women on these apps. And the result of that is that men tend to fare very poorly on them. Because if, it's 7-3 men to women on these apps, well, then there's going to be 4 men left over, even if everyone pairs up randomly. And they don't pair up randomly, by the way. So that's one issue. Another issue is that they are highly looks focused. So they're quite superficial. There's recent research coming out showing that looks matter about 9 times more than biographies on these apps. So there are certainly problems with them. However, I would caution against laying the current problems on the mating market at the feet of these apps, only because it's still the case that most people don't meet on dating apps. Most people still meet in the real world. And not only that, but dating apps have kind of passed their peak already. So my generation, Gen Z, we use these apps less than the previous generation. They've kind of came and peaked, and I think they'll always be a factor, but it's not like they're growing out of control at this point.
Throughout most human history, I guess, most people would meet their partners in some big social group where both sides were, as it were, known, recognised, and their behaviour was therefore to a certain extent controlled. And it was either in a shtetl, or it was a community group, or it was a church group, or it was some kind of social group. The less that's the case, then the less people who get together in the first place are going to have the same social backgrounds, and therefore perhaps the harder it is for them to spend the rest of their lives together.
I mean, it's an excellent point, and I would build on it. Not only are they less likely to have the same social backgrounds, but they're also less likely to have an integrated social network that supports the relationship. So if you meet on a dating app, then you're both strangers. Odds are you have 0 mutual friends and 0 connections supporting you. But normally, if you meet, even if you meet someone at college, right, where you're away from home, at least you'll probably have a shared social circle.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
You can have mutual verification of each other's personal qualities during the courtship stage. That is, you can have someone else to speak to and say, what's this person like? And you can get a real answer as opposed to this intense anonymity that comes from these apps. And then also, if the relationship is on the wrong side point, you have a mutual social support network to help you through it. It's much easier to break up with a stranger than it is to break up with someone who you have 10 mutual friends with and go to class with.
Absolutely. And Malcolm, you have an entire podcast, Species, which looks at human mating behaviour. So what do you think are the other big issues here?
Well, I would say that the biggest issue really is that the issues that we're talking about when we're talking about the quote-unquote mating crisis, and I'm quite cautious with that term, is most people are talking about delayed marriage and reduced marriage, and they're talking about increased singlehood and increased sexlessness. And these increases date back, in the UK, there's good data on this going back to the early 90s, for example. And it's shown pretty steady declines in all of those good things since then. And you'll note that that's conspicuously long before dating apps and long before social media came to prominence. So what's happening there? Well, I would say that part of it is, obviously this is kind of an over-determined phenomenon in the sense that there are issues of, and I don't say issues to mean that this is necessarily a bad thing, but factors such as declining religiosity. But I would say that frankly the main factor is growing pains associated with something very good, which is women's tremendous gains and among young women outpacing and overtaking of men in education and employment. Young women are doing really well, and that's a really good thing. But it's a really good thing that also has consequences for the mating market. Our cultural scripts around dating and around mating are built against a world where women were essentially... I mean, there's no other way to say it. We're adjusting to a world where women don't need men financially. And we are adapting. There's good signs.
But we are in
here,
the world where
but
women don't need men
one of
financially.
the consequences is that relationships have declined, at least for the moment.
Absolutely fascinating. Really, really good conversation. I can thank you so much for talking to LBC tonight.
Thank you so much for having me on, Andrew. I appreciate it.
Now, coming up, I'll be joined by the man who wants to be the next leader of the Green Party. As Labour focuses on reform voters, could he be the man to give Keir Starmer a problem to his left? The time now, 6:47.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
Do you blame the BBC for the Glastonbury farrago, or do you think this is all a fuss about, well, not much at all? If you're Jewish, I suspect you might have a rather different perspective.
Ian Dale on LBC.
I'd been in the family home for 30 years, but it was different. Too many rooms, too few voices. Moving to McCarthy Stone felt like a big step, but this place is full of life. I chat to someone every day. In the lounge, in the garden, even in the lift. I have my own apartment, but I'm never truly alone. I only wish I'd done it sooner.
Discover stunning retirement apartments exclusively for the over 55s. Search McCarthy Stone or call 0800 153 3055. Age restrictions and qualifying criteria apply.
Save this summer with Lidl Plus. Get 2 for £7 on burgers, jumbo sausages and more. And get 2 for £3.50 on our plant burgers, veggie sausages and more veggie classics. Download Lidl Plus and start saving this summer today. 18 plus GB only while stocks last. Terms apply. See lidl.co.uk/LPTV. Offer ends 27th of August.
If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, what you thought you were getting may not be what you ended up with. From unexpected site fee increases, running costs, a huge depreciation in value, many owners feel they've been missold. If you think this might be you, holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive the compensation you're entitled to. Text ASSIST to 78900 to find out more. That's ASSIST to 78900.
For stunning retirement apartments to buy already.
Seems unfair and unsustainable. There's also things too around the Bank of England where we are giving interest rates to loans that have been given out, so-called quantitative tightening. That could also raise billions of pounds. So there's lots of ways to fund public services, and also there are spending multipliers. So all the money that we spend on public services, we get back into our economy by a boosted economy.
I mean, the problem with talking about raising taxes as a central thing is an awful lot of people think one day that's going to be me, and it becomes unpopular. Do you think you can actually persuade middle-income, normal voters, as it were, that it's not them that are going to be hit?
I think it's about really getting the message across that this is the super rich. We're talking about people who are earning money while everyone else is sleeping, so it's not about people using their hands.
Are there enough of them?
Yes, I think so. And there was a report recently by Henley and Partners that said that a lot of millionaires and billionaires were going to flee the country. That's now largely been discredited. So I think we've overcome the first hurdle, which people said, will they not just leave? And that was a kind of trickle-down economics. I think we're into the second hurdle now, which is making sure that people who run small businesses or medium businesses know they're absolutely part of the solution here. This is really about the 99% versus the 1%. A super elite for far too long had been destroying our environment, destroying our democracy and destroying our communities. I think this is a unifying message that can speak to everyone, and that's why I want to be Green Party leader.
Not surprisingly, Keir Starmer and his team are focusing very heavily on voters who might defect from Labour to Reform. Do you think that they are making a big mistake, and in other words, that there are lots more voters to their left who they are alienating? And how big is that Labour vote that you think you can squeeze?
I think it's a catastrophic mistake, and I see my number one mission to make the Labour government more worried about losing votes and seats to the Green Party than to Reform. Now polling shows that over half of the people who voted Labour just last year are now thinking of voting for the Green Party or the Liberal Democrats. I think when we look at the Liberal Democrats, they've made big successes in the last few years, but actually I can tell you the coherent narrative that brings them together. In the Green Party, I think we have a very strong message, which is about reducing bills, reducing rents, and funding our public services by reducing inequality.
What would you say? I'm very involved in green politics. I'm an environmentalist, but I'm not on the left.
I think there's space for lots of people, and I think for anyone who wants to protect the environment or conserve the environment, and that's obviously soft conservatives, people who might have voted Conservative in the past, I think they're increasingly unhappy with what British democracy looks like, both from the Boris Johnson years and the Liz Truss years, and are actually looking for something different. I think this is why, ultimately, those of us who define ourselves on the left have to speak to a much broader group of people to say left-wing politics hasn't necessarily been what you've been told it's been for years, but actually it's just about reducing inequality and making sure everyone's got a fair shot.
And last question, I'd really like your reflection on why it is that the Green Party in this country has done so much less well than Green parties across Europe. And you look at the Germans and you look at Scandinavian countries, the Greens are really, really powerful in those political economies, much less so here. Why?
I think it's about two things. So one, I think a first-past-the-post system has undoubtedly held us back. In the last election, we got nearly 2 million votes, but only got 4 MPs. I think we've demonstrated now, even under first-past-the-post, we've worked out that we can and do win. We need to do much more of that. But secondly, I think we've not been bold enough. So when we go on the media being very proud of the message that we want to send, and also when people criticise us or find what they think are gaps in the plans, really being out there, standing in our truth, being authentic, and really making sure that millions of people in this country hear about the Green Party.
All right, Zach, you've talked about being bold, and you do want to be the leader. So let me ask you straightforwardly what you think about the Glastonbury row. Do you think it's right to prosecute or go after Kneecap and Bob Villan, the other group?
I just got back from Glastonbury, so I was there.
You were there. Were you waving a flag?
I was waving lots of flags, but actually I think Glastonbury is not the story here. I think genocide is the story. And we have a British government that are not just complicit, but active participants through the selling of arms, sharing of intelligence, and the fact that they will not condemn Israel's attack on Iran, and indeed the US's attack on Iran. I want Keir Starmer to step up, and I think that has to be the story here.
Well, you heard what Bob Villan said on stage about kill the IDF. Do you support that? Do you think we should be objecting to that?
I wouldn't ever support anyone saying kill something or someone, but I also still think condemnation seems a little bit hypocritical when we're not condemning, or not enough people are condemning, the British government. I think a British government that have access to arms and are literally involved with the killing of people in terms